Uh, I have some things to talk about today regarding the history of the internet. Also, I have accidentally created a lot of busy things that I will eventually be end up doing. So if you're trying to contact me, you're gonna have to be specific about it. So yeah. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. My life is about to get crazy in a good way. What the hell? I didn't do that. Get out of here. You two, get out of here. Wait, what? Hey, there you go. You just, you just stay there, okay? Oh, to my God. I know it's hard to let go. I'm just kind of listening to this in the background. It turns out I have to catch up to. Apparently, like, I have the same musical taste as a 50-year-old, so I have a lot of shit to catch up with. Ah! Oh my god. I don't know what else to get frustrated about, dude. Um, I forgot what I was doing again. It seems to be a common thread with me. Hmm. Okay. So I went to my local rock store, which I'm going to be honest with you. I would assume. Well, actually, I'm going to start. I'm gonna preface this with This is really loud. It needs to be quieter for me. Oh shit, that's why. I forgot. I have my audio right there. Right there. It's louder for me than for you. Um so what's in my hand right now looks like bowding balls. Bowding. B-A-O ding. Bowding. Um there's a couple of things that bowding can be used for. One of them is for hand strength and dexterity. Um, but essentially, that's kind of like a fidget spinner before fidget spinners were a thing. And it's used for kind of meditational tool slash relaxation tool. It can also be used as a a focus aid like a fidget spinner is for ADHD kids. Um, the idea is that you don't want them to touch. Whenever they touch, like these are pyrite. Whenever they touch, they always make a noise. So the idea is that you don't want them to touch in your hand. Baoding balls have a spring and a chime mechanism. So they sound a lot better than that. But it's the same purpose. These are heavier because Baoding balls are usually hollowed out. But Baoding balls are cool. I always thought they were cool. Anyway, there's a significance behind why I picked pyrite specifically. And this bowl specifically. When I start talking about them, you'll understand why. This bowl is an onyx bowl. ONYX. Onyx. Not like the Pokemon. Similar, but no. I want you to think about the color of this onyx bowl. I picked out the bowl specifically so that I could hold my full Baoding balls in there. So they wouldn't roll away when I'm not playing with them. I'm not playing with my balls. It's kind of a oxymoron of a color scheme for what you would think about when you think about the color onyx, right? Here's the other thing. These balls here are made of pyrite. Now, right now, they are smoothed into spherical shape, and they don't look like it. But when you're mining, these things look suspiciously close to gold, and both look very similar to each other in raw form. The difference between gold and pyrite, we call it fool's gold. Pyrite, fool's gold, because of the gold rush, right? And people rushing to get in on the action would mine fool's gold. It's waste their time and energy getting this thing that looks like gold, and then they would bring it in and they're like, no, it's not gold, it's pyrite. One of the ways that you can tell the difference between fool's gold and pyrite, real gold and pyrite, is that real gold is actually it's a really soft metal. Pyrite, on the other hand, isn't. So I have these things. I got these things as a kind of, I picked up these specifically because I saw they had like a bunch of spherical shapes in the store, and I was like, oh, these are really cool. They had copper balls, and I didn't pick up copper balls because they oxidize. I don't want my hands turning green. And they had all sorts of different semi-precious stones. A lot of them were like poisonous as hell. I mean, not like they were heavy metal toxicity, so they weren't like bad, but if I was gonna be messing around with them a lot, And I would. Doesn't matter what I would have gotten from that store. I would have been playing around with it a lot. Anyway. Oh shit. I guess one of the other things you can do with bouting balls is you can actually have them touch. So that's two ways to deal with this exercise. That's cool. I don't know if that was intentional, but it is two specific different kinds of exercises. One is to do it like this. This one's easier to do than the one I was doing. It's more like you never let them not touch. So I ended up with the pyrite. Actually, I don't know what the toxicity level of pyrite is. I'm gonna look that up. Maybe I'm wrong. Toxicity of pyrite. Pyrite. Oh, it might contain a small amounts of arsenic. Huh. Okay, well, that's fine. Should be fine. It'll be alright. It'll be alright. Might contain. Not water soluble. And I'm not using it as a water filter, so it should be fine, maybe. As long as I don't try to drink it, I guess. But also like a very small amount anyway. And only maybe. Probably because it can form in areas where arsenic forms. Naturally. But yeah. So we have pyrite, the thing that is often mistaken for something valuable, and onyx. And that color scheme is not onyx. Not what I think of when I get onyx. I'm gonna look that up. Onyx color. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, there is two. Black and white. Onyx primarily refers to the parallel branded variety of chalcedony, a silicate material. Agate and onyx are both varieties of layered chalcedony that differ only in the form of the bands. Agate has curved bands, and onyx has parallel bands. So wait, what? The colors of its bands range from black to almost every color. Huh. Well, it's a completely different thing of what you think about when you think of onyx. Huh. I also stopped by the comic book store. People. Try, but the dead don't die. What the fuck is this?
Just waiting for some mods, y'all.
yeah, so I got involved in some game projects, some music projects, some government projects. I can't keep everything straight. I don't know how to get an agent. Bruh. I don't know how I know this guy. Well, weird. Hmm. Um, yeah. So today I'm talking about some stuff about the internet. On one of my web design things earlier, I was talking about metadata. And metadata, if you don't know. Oh, shit. Oh, shit! I knew that was gonna happen. These things are heavy. It'll still work as a bowl, though. I'll get, It's okay. Do you know what can can kintsugi. Kintsugi is the art known as golden repair. They use a kind of like gold paint to put things like this back together. And no, it's not perfect like it used to be. But it adds character and uniqueness and an artistic feel to it. And it brings life back into that which is broken. You could always try to repair it as best as you can to get rid of the cracks. Which is certainly something you could try to do. But I think that would be a lie, wouldn't it? The question is, what should I repair this bolt with? Should I just use gold dust? Or should I use something else? Hmm. These days, we use a lot of plastic stuff. We use plastic because it is easy to create, and if it breaks, we can just get a new one. But it is also pretty durable. It doesn't break as often. It's also better for people that make goods. The one problem with making anything, with producing anything, is that eventually everybody's gonna have one. So what do you do when everybody has one? You can't keep selling the same thing. At least not at the same price that you were selling at before, so something has to change. You can make it cheaper, less durable, break easily. Why do you think my phone has a drop resistant case on it? It's because it's not profitable to make it more sturdy. I would say that is a problem. Like, that is a problem with my phone, but these days it's a problem with every phone, every single one. And I'm looking forward to the day when it is finally not. Because I like my tools to be rugged, because I get into a lot of scrapes, which means I have a high chance of damaging a lot of my uh, whatever I have on me at the time. It's why I prefer, like, the pants that I wear are 511 tactical pants. I prefer those because they are designed to go through the ringer, right? A lot like military style pants, like they are. They are military style pants, and they're often sold um, in the clothing shops on basis because that's what they're for, right? I like utility-kilts for the same reason. They're rugged as hell, dude. It's also one of the reasons why I dislike fast food fashion. Um, and it's really a problem not just with uh, low end goods, but high end goods as well. A lot of the high end designers, they're not making their designs to last. That's why people are always so worried about those expensive dresses. They're not really that expensive when you look at the materials. They're expensive because of the name on the tag. This is designed for pretty people by pretty people who also happen to be gay men. So the question is, how do we change that? Because people want to do the easy thing, right? There's a big push against the protection of oil, petroleum products. You know, the conservative thing used to be, why don't we just use our alcohol to run our shit? And, then they banned alcohol that one time for reasons. They're like, oh, because we only have oil now. And then they put lead in the alcohol so that people don't drink it and then put it back on the market. Our solutions to certain things are often super roundabout, more expensive, and a lot more poisonous. Like plastic, oil. There's a difference between public and private companies. I don't know why I started thinking about that. No, I started thinking about it because of the conservative and the liberal perspective. Um, Liberals were complaining about censorship on platforms, social media platforms. And they were complaining about it because Twitter used to be a publicly owned company, which means that anybody that used Twitter could own one share of the stock, which means that if they got banned, if they got censored, that was a big ass problem. Like, if you're banning the owners of your company, that's not good, right? But then Twitter, the big brand company, sold the entire thing to Elon Musk. And at that point, it went from a public company to a private company. It's no longer traded on the stock market. You can't just buy a share. It is Elon's company. That is a big difference between the two. So, at first, conservatives thought, well, it's a privately owned company. They can do whatever they want with it, right? And liberals were like, no, that's not how that works, specifically with Twitter. And then it became a privately owned company, and they're like, the conservatives, started taking the liberal side. They can't censor my free speech. And they're like, liberals were like, weren't you paying attention? It became a privately owned company. You guys should know this shit. You were just arguing it, right? Dude. Like, y'all need to learn your shit a lot better. So I'm gonna start doing more educational streams. Plus, I need more people to make rugged clothes, because and rugged tools and utilities, because I am not, I might look like it, but I am not a person that avoids getting dirty. Like, that getting dirty is half the fun for me. Like, if you're not getting dirty, if you're not like putting holes in your pants the correct way, you're doing it wrong. And yes, there is a correct way to put holes in your pants, and it is not buying your pants from American Eagle. It is going out with your Levi jeans and doing the work. I don't support Levi jeans. It's just part of the joke. Um, Whew. Anyway, metadata. So, last episode on developing HTML-Z. Not last episode, like several episodes ago. We learned about down here. We learned about meta tags. This is important. This is a whole shtick behind it, and it's very important to today's internet because everybody thinks that meta tags is the way to go after we stopped using them shortly after meta tags were invented. They're still here, yes, but we stopped using them in the way that they were meant to be used originally. Now, meta tags are only used when you visit the website directly, and that data is usable through your browser. But you see right here, meta name, keywords. This, keywords, is the old school word for hashtag. Some content creators will know that that is what a keyword is. This is primarily the reason why I don't use hashtags and I don't like using keywords, is because I grew up on the internet way back when this was a thing, right? The hell is this? Get out of here. Right. Get out of here. So, in case you don't know, search engines used to. Okay, well, here, this is how a search engine works. The company has a type of software that they create, that they call spiders. And the spiders are bots that traverse the web. Get it? So they go across the web and they collect all this data for the web. And then they store that data into a database. And that is how modern search engines started. We used to have something like Ask Jeeves, Yahoo, and I forget what the other search engine was before Google. So, the reason why this was bad is because content creators and hackers, they weren't called content creators then. They were just called douchebags. So the content creators found out that they could abuse the system by simply putting in every single tag of any keyword they wanted. They just put every single one. So you would be searching for something and there would be 100 results that all included the thing that you were searching for, like the word you were searching for, but they would also have other things like uh, BBW, BBC, anime, furry porn, and iPhone. Sorry, iPod before the iPhone. So they would have literally just the whole dictionary on the page, and every single word that was not in the dictionary and all the acronyms, and that would get them views. That would make them, those pages look like people liked them when all they were doing was messing around with the system. They're just early hackers trying to make a quick profit. Some of them were just hackers and the anarchy kind of hackers where they're just trying to cause trouble. You know, it's whatever. And after that, these keywords now, they don't matter to Google or any search engine really. They don't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what keywords you put down. That's not how they are gauging what your website is. Instead of using those keywords now, they actually get the actual content off the page itself. And they compare all of that to the other pages that are on the same domain name. And that's how Google got its foot in the door to where it was it was the first search engine. Shut up, advertisement. Just gave away the spoilers. Get out of here. Gave away the spoilers. How did it know what I was going to talk about? Anyway. Essentially, what Google had created was an early version of what we now call AI. It was a way to gauge what people are searching for, what they meant in a way that the machine could understand what it was they were searching for, and how popular it was to the location that they were in, and what did that actually mean to the person that they were serving the data to. When we talk about the algorithm online, we're talking about AI, the early versions of AI that help us get these search engines, the searches that we do every day done. The problem with the algorithms these days is that they suck. For example, there is an algorithm for the swipe dictionary on your phone and autocorrect. And if you've been paying attention for the past 15 years like I have, you haven't been, but I have. You're welcome. You'll notice that as time went on, the algorithms for these dictionaries got less and less accurate and more prone to making mistakes. Starting with the very early versions of swipe and autocorrect. And they are practically unusable today. Not for everybody. Keep in mind, for me, a lot of these algorithms are unusable because they don't serve my needs anymore. They were made to a more wider public that use them in a different way from me, and I cannot adjust to that because the rest of the public, in my opinion, is dumb. Okay? That's just the way it is. So my typos actually Actually, yeah, it's gonna sound bad, right? My typos actually come from all the mistakes everybody else is making. That's not. That's not. I mean, that's what I'm gonna say, but it's not really the case. It's just that I'm not using the technology in the way that the algorithm expects me to use it because I have such a high skill level and a high precision to what I mean. Specifically, other people are more specific to their interests. So when we're talking about the public as a whole, when we're talking about popular culture, pop culture has nothing to do with somebody like me who is nearly divorced from pop culture. Like, I kind of have an idea of what's going on and I enjoy stuff like everybody else, but I don't I don't do it for the pop culture. I do it for very specific other things. My interest, games, design, hacking. Like, I am very precise in what I do and talk about most of the time. So, right now, for me, because I've been watching these AIs, I see how AI looks, how AI works, how these algorithms look, how these algorithms work. And I see uh these algorithms are fucking dumb, all of them. Like, I've played around with ChatGPT, I've played around with all of the AI algorithms. They are so dumb. And if you do not know how dumb they are, I got bad news for you. Yeah, that means you're dumber than the AI. You are dumber than the dumb AI. Not even the smart, intelligent AI, the dumb AI. And for me, the dumb AI is really fucking dumb. It's not even like a smart person thing. Like, it's not that, oh, I'm so smart. It's just that I've been looking at these algorithms for a long time because they're tools that I use every single day for my entire life. And that's what it's going to be like for people going forward into the future. If teachers cannot spot the difference between an AI written paper and a handwritten paper, there's a problem with the teacher. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. If you can't spot the difference between an AI generated art piece and a hand generated art piece, that's a you problem. If you're a good enough artist, you don't even have to know like all of the references of every art ever. You can start seeing the patterns that AI makes whenever they're developing these things, whenever they're producing these arts, and it's very novelty today. Um, very novel, but it's novel in the same way that Robbie the robot was. Or there's another robot. There was a robot that would take cassette tapes and they were tutor your kids, and they're like, oh wow, these are gonna be so great in 20 years when they can do so much more. Well, I haven't seen any better robots since. I'm pretty sure that all of both of those robots, they just ended up becoming prostitutes because they have no other job prospects, you know. Um, so here's the problem and why I started out with keywords when talking about the algorithm in AI. Right now, every single piece of social media ever relies heavily on keywords. Now, if you were paying attention to anything I just said, I hope that it was you were paying attention to when I said that Google was the first AI engine to help bypass the keyword issue of people fucking with the keywords. So essentially, we fixed the problem 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, and for some reason, we're having the same exact problem that we just fucking fixed. Like, do you see the problem? Do you see why I'm frustrated with the internet these days? Because it's stuff that already got fixed. It's stuff that we already fixed. Stuff that we've already created that's getting all this attention just now. 2 decades later, after it was forgotten, even by Google. Google forgot their own reason for existing. Oh my god. You know? Anyway. So if you're worried about your clicks and your view count as a content creator, I'm telling you right now, they're bullshit because the algorithm is bullshit. And the reason why the algorithm is bullshit is because nobody cares. Let me give you another thing. Why is it that every single AI that ever gets created eventually gets a bias towards anti-Semitism? Is it because that's the logical thing to do? No. Because computers are dumb. And AI is an oxymoron for a reason. Artificial intelligence. It's not real. There might be one day down the line, where humans are capable of creating a machine with a soul in it, and it can do everything that a human can. It's possible that machines already have a soul right now, but a soul is something we cannot gauge. Well, that's debatable. We cannot physically measure it. Now, I seem to have scared a lot of people with my near magical ability to identify people behind a mask. If I can do it, guess what? That's right. That means anybody else can do it. I'm not magical. It might be something that I was able to do first, or talk about first, but it's not unique to me. That is a particular problem because one of the things that we're using AI algorithms for is for tracking people specifically. and people have avoided facial detection so far by using blackface and other. That wasn't a joke. AI is racist because it's developed by white people, not on purpose. They just don't test it on black people to make sure it works. Right? Yeah, that's right. The song is goofy. I'll let you decide whether or not it's goofy in a good way or a bad way. Ah. So, AI is dumb. The reason why AI can do what seems like miraculous things is because you don't know how they work. That's it. I've created algorithms that replicate what an AI can do. Um, any human can do the same thing. Uh, they haven't so far. Like, we haven't created a simpler non-black box variant of a software that writes papers for you because linguists, journalists, and whatnot don't get involved with that kind of application development. I've talked about this before, how I am a jack of all trades and how I'm terrible at math. I mean, I'm okay at math, but I I am a professional at algebra and I can't do anything higher without a lot of googling. Okay? So, because there is this distinct separation between different kinds of jobs, we've never seen these kinds of algorithms before. Even though I, as a hobbyist, have made them without the kinds of things that require us to make them so far. That sounds uh, like I'm giving myself some super high praise, right? But for me, it's just a thing that I can see, because I remember my high school education. So you got to keep in mind that a lot of these things that I can do are just because instead of staying awake in class, is I applied my knowledge to stuff that I enjoyed, you know. In my math class, the only reason why I got to where I was in math class is because they prevented me from getting into programming for my school without having certain requirements for it that I should have had in middle school but didn't have until halfway through high school. It's very frustrating. Um, Instead of doing what the teacher asked me in art class, I did whatever I felt like. I kind of followed the template that they gave out, but I was often either not understanding everything that the teacher was trying to teach, or bored with what the teacher was trying to teach. Um, and then there's anything to deal with computers because I'm a super tech head. So I took every single computer class that I could take that they would let me, which means that I took like a Microsoft Office course like 3 or 4 times in between middle school and high school. And like every single time I took it, it was billed as a different class or like a more advanced class. So I would take the class and I'd be like, oh my God, I already learned all this shit. But, in middle school and high school, you can't pick another elective. So, or at least you couldn't when I was in there. So, just stuck with it. Um, then I picked up the programming classes because, of course, I picked up the programming classes. And the digital art classes were a no brainer because I was not allowed to take the programming classes. So I took that instead. My English classes, instead of reading the books, I wrote poetry. I'm just talking about, how this gets me to be able to do these kinds of things that look magic when they're not. It's because I focused a lot more on my interests than what everybody else thought my interests should be. And then, they told me that that was wrong. I took the wrong path and I would never make it to be anything. So, it's always hurdles. Always hurdles. You know, if people focused on their interests a lot more, we'd be a lot more technologically advanced, not only as a country, but as a world. But we have this weird fixation that only people with affluence can do the affluential jobs. It's often the poorest among us that have the best ideas to solve shit. Because, you know, innovation is born out of necessity. If you are affluent, if you need for nothing, you have no innovation. If you're not, if you don't have a stake in the game, if you don't have skin in the game, you don't have innovation. If you can't figure out how to put your own stake in the game, then you're not worth anything. And no, money doesn't count. If you are affluent, and the money that you're putting in is like a couple of bucks, for me would be a couple of bucks. For you would be, a couple thousand bucks. Like you can't drop the same money that I would drop on a PlayStation and expect to feel like you actually have skin in the game. You don't. You know, that's why I keep talking about how I think everybody needs to at least have a chance to do public service. there are some people that are going to want to shirk it and be like, oh, I never want to do public service. So I don't know. Maybe we just make it so they can't vote. We're like, yeah, sure, you don't have to do public service, but now you can't vote because you don't know how the system works. It's pretty simple. That works for that, like, solves the situation everybody keeps talking about. Like, maybe we should have people take a standardized test in order to be able to vote. Yeah, or you can give them a stake in the game, give them some buy-in here by making them part of the system, give them an idea of how it works. I don't know, like, I'm not kidding when I say anybody can do what I can do. It's all about whether or not you want to. A lot of people, they get a job, they hate their job, so they look towards the end of the night, to go have some relaxation, or they wait to the weekend to go out partying. Because you need to blow off steam, right? Because everybody's job sucks. Well, maybe everybody's job shouldn't suck. One of the arguments is that we're always going to need a plumber, right? You know that some people actually enjoy plumbing, right? Some people actually enjoy housekeeping. Some people actually enjoy cooking. There's no reason for anybody to do something that they hate doing. That's how you get people to spit in your food at McDonald's. Just look at Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay's an idiot, but Gordon Ramsay would never spit in your food no matter how much he hates you. He might call you an idiot sandwich to your face at your table, but he has way too much pride to spit in your food. You know what I mean? But that's the world we live in. Everybody needs to do a job they hate instead of a job that they would actually enjoy. So everybody's looking at everybody else's job being like, I hate my job. I wish I had your job. Can it really sing without me? You feel the same. I don't sleep. Did it again. Anyway, continuing on, I have long since stopped talking about internet education. I have already gone over my internet lesson, but I am continuing on with what seems like stream of thought, but It's all part of the same thing, really. Everybody hates their job. That's why everything sucks. If you hate your job, like if people actually enjoy doing their job at Facebook or Twitter or anything really. If people actually enjoyed working on what they were working on, all of these things would not be straight garbage. It's as simple as that. But nobody really enjoys the work that they're doing. Anyway, that reminds me. Why isn't there a hardware store next to the gemstones shop? Jewelry's a thing, you know. As somebody who likes to do arts and crafts, I would like these two stores next to each other. Because then I could like get an idea of what I would need to buy while also being like not having to make a list. This is one of those weird things. Like, do you know those DIY life hack videos that are like, why would you go through all that extra effort? That's not a hack. That's not a life hack. Have you ever considered that for that person that made that video? Maybe it is. Why would that be a life hack for that person? The answer is because those are the materials that the author routinely has access to, as opposed to the correct materials. You know, one of the things that people enjoy doing is getting stuff on sale and trying to figure out how to do something else with it. Or they go to their favorite stores and they see little pieces of stuff and do whatever they want with it. Or they're taught make do with what you have. And that becomes a thing. So people use stuff that they shouldn't be using. One, because they don't know it exists, and two, because the stores that carry the stuff that would make their lives easier don't exist in their areas because affluenza. So, while we could be encouraging jewelry hobbyists, and there are a lot of them, we don't because we don't want to put a tool shop in an affluent neighborhood. This would really help out places like Hobby Lobby and Joann's Fabric from being so dominant. Both of these stores, the things that they sell are not just art supplies. They sell things that you would find at a tool store. You know, like jeweler's wire, jeweler's screwdrivers, pliers. And instead of encouraging working together with other disciplines, they find ways to sell stuff that, you know, people end up using to disassemble and make something else out of it. Life hack videos. The reason why I have so many solutions for so many different things is upsetting to me. I should not have these solutions. Other people should have solved them. Other people have solved them. But we're so worried about capitalism that we forget that the point of capitalism is to encourage competition and cooperation. And without those two things, we're only focused on profit. Capitalism fails in the worst way. Now I'm going to switch to civics. I'm going to go read my U.S. Constitution book. I've been hankering to get to the part about the implementation of the Second Amendment. I'm going to show you this book cover. You can make what you want out of it. But there are some people in my algorithm that think I don't know any better. I want to remind you that I read books that I have no other business reading, except that I feel like reading a bunch of different books, learning a bunch of different disciplines. Did you know I know how to lockpick? Actually, I carry a lockpick set on me. Not everywhere, in my bag. Just in case. I actually helped somebody lockpick something for themselves, and then because they had a thing that had a lock on it, like a cheap lock. You know what I mean by cheap lock. The one where you could probably just open it by putting a screwdriver in it and turning. But, you know, I'm not that destructive. um... So, yeah. My friend was going to do some stuff with this thing. And this thing was broken. You know, exactly her words, not mine. Anyway, this thing was broken. This thing was also a battery. I'll remind you that I'm an electrician. On top of every other thing that I can do. So it was a cheap lock and a cheap battery, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do the friendly thing for my friend, and I'm gonna clean this stuff up, get it ready for her so she can put it back together. And, you know, so I lockpicked it out. Because that's what she was doing. But what she wanted to do, I guess, was she wanted somebody else to do all of it for her. Because she enjoyed collecting leverage against people in the worst way. So anyway, what ended up happening was she told me about how she wanted all this help with this thing, and I was like, well, I'm an electrician, so I will set this up for her, and it'll be great. So I lockpicked it out of there, and I cleaned up the wires, and I was like, all right, the only thing that needs to be done now is the contacts on this thing need to be cleaned. I would have cleaned them had they not been soldered to the wires connected to the battery. So I clipped the wires and then put a connector in it so that you could just connect them back together. But all you need to do is clean those things see if it works. And she was like, I don't trust you. You don't trust me with your broken battery. He was like, no, I had an expert on that specific battery that I was going to talk to. Like, you know, I'm an expert in this field, right? I have documented proof that I am an expert in this field. So, you know, I did the nice thing. I was like, all right, look, I'm sorry. I've obviously crossed some boundaries here. What can I do to fix it? And she's like, I don't know. We'll see. If I need you to pay for another battery, that'll be right in my back pocket. And I was like, oh, we're not friends anymore. We're not friends anymore. If that's how you're going to treat me, that was like 8 things back to back. I was like, all right, I will never talk to you again. That's fine. Get out of my life. I think that's the first time I've told this story. If you can put 2 and 2 together, that's the point where I was like, we're done. You obviously don't see me as a friend. There's a lot more to it. A lot more things that I saw. But, you know, it was at that point where I was like, I tried to help you 3 times. And every single time, instead of being like, thank you, or cooperating with me in any way, you asked for more or insulted my intelligence. I have no reason to do anything for you ever again. So, you know, if you ever felt like that, you're not alone. Some people are bitches. Third class. I don't know what has to happen to you to give you that kind of mindset. Well, whatever it is, it's not healthy. It's not smart. People just, that's their the way they think, I guess. Well, they're the problem. This section, this chapter, is the Boston Massacre. A speech John Hancock delivered in Boston after the Boston Massacre in 1774. Men, brethren, fathers, and fellow countrymen. The attentive gravity, the venerable appearance of this crowded audience, the dignity which I behold in the countenance of so many in this vast assembly, the solemnity of the occasion on which we have met together, joined to a consideration of the part I am to take in the important business of this day, fill me with an awe hitherto unknown, and heighten the sense which I have ever had of my unworthiness to fill this sacred desk. But allured by the call of some of my respected fellow citizens, with whose request it is always my greatest pleasure to comply, I almost forgot my want of ability to perform what they required. In this situation, I find my only support in assuring myself that a generous people will not severely censure what they know was well intended. Though its want of merit should prevent their being able to applaud it, and I pray that my sincere attachment to the interest of my country and the hearty detestation of every design formed against her liberties may be admitted as some apology for my appearance in this place. I have always, from my earliest youth, rejoiced in the felicity of my fellow men, and have ever considered it as the indispensable duty of every member of society to promote, as far as in him lies, the prosperity of every individual, but more especially of the community to which he belongs, and also as a faithful subject of the state. To use his utmost endeavors to detect, and having detected strenuously, to oppose every traitorous plot which its enemies may devise for its destruction. Security to the persons and properties of the governed is so obviously the design and end of civil government, that to attempt a logical proof of it would be like burning tapers at noonday to assist the sun in enlightening the world. And it cannot be either virtuous or honorable to attempt to support a government of which this is not the great and principal basis. And it is to the last degree vicious and infamous to attempt to support a government which manifestly tends to render the persons and properties of the governed insecure. Some boast of being friends to government. I am a friend to righteous government, to a government founded upon the principles of reason and justice. But I glory in publicly avowing my eternal enmity to tyranny. Is the present system, which the British administration have adopted for the government of the colonies, a righteous government, or is it tyranny? Here suffer me to ask, and would to heaven there could be an answer. What tenderness, what regard, respect, or consideration has Great Britain shown in their late transactions for the security of the persons or properties of the inhabitants of the colonies? Or rather, what have they omitted doing to destroy that security? They have declared that they have ever had, and of right ought ever to have, full power to make laws of sufficient validity to bind the colonies in all cases whatever. They have exercised this pretended right by imposing a tax on us without our consent. And lest we should show some reluctance at parting with our property, her fleets and armies are sent to enforce their mad pretensions. The town of Boston, ever faithful to the British crown, has been invested by a British fleet. The troops of George III have crossed the wide Atlantic, not to engage an enemy, but to assist a band of traitors in trampling on the rights and liberties of his most loyal subjects in America. Those rights and liberties which, as a father, he ought ever to regard, and as a king he is bound, in honor, to defend from violation, even at the risk of his own life. Whew. But the dead don't die. Let not the history of the illustrious house of Brunswick inform posterity, that a king descended from that glorious monarch, George II, once set his British subjects to conquer and enslave his subjects in America, but be perpetual infamy entailed upon that villain, who dared to advise his master to such execrable measures. For it was easy to foresee the consequences which so naturally followed upon sending troops into America, to enforce obedience to acts of the British Parliament, which neither God nor man ever empowered them to make. Dude, I walked a bunch again today. My legs are still. They can't get comfortable, dude. Ugh. My cup of water. Where did I put that? I do need to get a drink. Sorry. All right. You can die, but the dead don't die. I had a thought. If the top tier brands aren't making money off of their knockoffs since they make a new thing every season, y'all got a really bad scheme that you or rely on enforcement of counterfeit and not being able to make money off of them instead. If ain't no person that can't afford it going to pay for it. Let's see. For it was easy to foresee the consequences which so naturally followed upon sending troops into America, to enforce obedience to acts of the British Parliament, which neither God nor man ever empowered them to make. It was reasonable to expect that troops, who knew the errand they were sent upon, would treat the people whom they were to subjugate with a cruelty and haughtiness which too often buries the honorable character of a soldier in the disgraceful name of an unfeeling ruffian. The troops, upon their first arrival, took possession of our Senate House, and pointed their cannon against the Judgment Hall, and even continued them there, whilst the Supreme Court of Judicature for this province was actually sitting there to decide upon the lives and fortunes of the king's subject. Holy fucking shit. That sounds fucking familiar, doesn't it? Our streets nightly resounded with the noise of riot and debauchery. Our peaceful citizens were hourly exposed to shameful insults, and often felt the effects of their violence and outrage. But this was not all. As though they thought it not enough to violate our civil rights, they endeavored to deprive us of the enjoyment of our religious privileges, to vitiate our morals, and thereby render us worthy of destruction. Hence the rude din of arms which broke upon your solemn devotions in your temples. On that day, hallowed by heaven, and set apart by God himself for his peculiar worship. Sonic salvation. Same cells inside. Don't see them not there. Lux Eterna. I'll look up something. I don't think it has any bearing. Hence, impious oaths and blasphemies so often tortured your unaccustomed ears. Hence, all the arts which idleness and luxury could invent were used to betray our youth of one sex into extravagance and effeminate, and of the other to infant. What the fuck? The fuck is he talking about here? What the fuck? That's all the arts which idleness and luxury. Who's he talking about? He better not be talking about what I think he's talking about. Lost me. I'm gonna keep talking. I don't know what he's talking about here. We'll look into it later. Convent, we're used to betray our youth of one sex into extravagance and effeminacy, and of the other into infamy and ruin. And did they not succeed but too well? Did not a reverence for religions sensibly decay? Did not our infants almost learn to lisp out curses before they knew their horrid import? Did not our youth forget they were Americans, and regardless of the admonitions of the wise and aged, servilely copy from their tyrants those vices which finally must overthrow the empire of Great Britain? And must I be compelled to acknowledge that even the noblest, fairest part of all the lower creation did not entirely escape the cursed snare? When virtue has once erected her throne in the female breast, it is upon so solid a basis that nothing is able to expel the heavenly inhabitant. I have no idea what he's talking about here, don't ask. But have there not been some few, indeed, I hope, whose youth and inexperience have rendered them a prey to wretches, whom, upon the least reflection, they would have despised and hated as foes to God and their country? Okay, this part definitely sounds familiar. I fear there have been some such unhappy instances, or why have I seen an honest father clothed with shame? Or why a virtuous mother drowned in tears? I don't think he was talking about gay people. I think he was using his words in a different context than what we're thinking it is. That's also my hope. So we'll see if I'm right, but I think that's where those words are coming from. But I forbear and come reluctant. Actually, let's look at this. He's talking about both sexes, right? All the arts which idleness and luxury could invent were used to betray our youth of one sex into extravagance and effeminacy, and of the other to infamy and ruin. That sounds like the one sex into extravagance and effeminacy was women, and of the other to infamy and ruin. Sounds like a certain somebody who really wanted to shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk. Infamy. Hmm. Again, we'll look into it, but I that sounds like it's okay. He's talking about when virtue is once erected or thrown in the female breast. It is upon so solid a basis that nothing is able to expel the heavenly inhabitant. No, I still don't get that line. I fear there have been some unhappy instances, or why have I seen an honest father clothed with shame, or why a virtuous mother drowned in tears? But I forbear, and have come reluctantly to that dismal night when in such quick succession we felt the extremes of grief, astonishment, and rage. When heaven in anger for a dreadful moment suffered hell to take the reins. When Satan, when Satan with his chosen band opened the sluice of New England's blood, and sacrilegiously polluted our land with the dead bodies of her guiltless sons. Let this sad tale of death never be told without a tear. Let not the heaving bosom cease to burn with manly indignation at the barbarous story. The long tracks of future time, let every parent tell the shameful story to his listening child until tears of pity glisten in their eyes, and boiling passions shake their tender frames. And whilst the anniversary of their ill-fated night is kept a jubilee in the grim courts of pandemonium, let all America join in one common prayer to heaven, that the inhuman, unprovoked murders of the 5th of March, 1770, planned by Hillsborough and a knot of treacherous knaves in Boston, and executed by the cruel hand of Preston and his sanguinary coadjutors, may ever stand on history without a parallel. But what my countrymen withheld the ready arm of vengeance from executing instant justice on the vile assassins. Perhaps you feared promiscuous carnage might ensue, and that the innocent might share the fate of those who had performed the infernal deed. But were not all guilty? Were you not too tender of the lives of those who came to fix a yoke on your necks? But I must not too severely blame a fault which great souls only can commit. May that magnificence of spirit, which scorns the low pursuit of malice, may that generous compassion which often preserves from ruin even a guilty villain, forever actuate the noble bosoms of Americans. He's talking about noble bosoms of Americans. He's not talking about Lady Booba. He's talking about all breasts. All breasts matter. But let not the miscreant host vainly imagine that we feared their arms. No, them we despised. We dread nothing but slavery. Death is the creature of a poltroon's brains. The fuck is a poltroon? Coward. I had to look that one up because in today's context, it does not mean coward. Where was I? Before I was distracted by a potential slur. "'Tis immortality to sacrifice ourselves for the salvation of our country. We fear not death. That gloomy night, the pale-faced moon, and the affrighted stars that hurried through the sky can witness that we fear not death. Our hearts, which, at the recollection, glow with rage that 4 revolving years have scarcely taught us to restrain, can witness that fear were not death. No. Can witness that we fear not death. And happy it is for those who dared to insult us, that their naked bodies are not now piled up, an everlasting monument to Massachusetts bravery. Ugh. But they retired, they fled, and in that flight they found their only safety. We then expected that the hand of public justice would soon inflict that punishment upon the murderers, which by the laws of God and man they had incurred. But let the unbiased pen of a Robertson, or perhaps of some equally famed American, conduct this trial before the great tribunal of succeeding generations. And though the murderers may escape the just resentment of an outraged people, though drowsy in justice, intoxicated by the poisonous draught perpetuated, for her cup still nods upon her rotten seat, yet be assured such complicated crimes will meet their due reward. Tell me, ye bloody butchers, ye villains high and low, ye wretches who contrived as well as you who executed the inhuman deed, do you not feel the goads and strings of conscious guilt pierce through your savage bosoms? Though some of you may think yourselves exalted to a height that bids defiance to human injustice, and others shroud yourself beneath the mask of hypocrisy, and build your hopes of safety on the low arts of cunning, chicanery, and falsehood. Yet, do you not sometimes feel the gnawings of that worm which never dies? Do not the injured shades of Maverick, Gray, Caldwell, Attucks, and Carr attend you in your solitary walks, arrest you even in the midst of your debaucheries, and fill even your dreams with terror? But if the unappeased manes of the dead should not disturb their murderers, yet surely even your obdurate hearts must shrink, and your guilty blood must chill within your rigid veins. When you behold the miserable monk, the wretched victims of your savage cruelty, observe his tottering knees, which scarce sustain his wasted body. Shoot. I shouldn't have looked up. Look on his haggard eyes, mark well the death-like paleness on his fallen cheek, and tell me, does not the sight plant daggers in your souls? Unhappy monk, cut off, in the gay morn of manhood, from all the joys which sweeten life, doomed to drag on a pitiful existence, without even a hope to taste the pleasures of returning health. Yet, monk, thou livest not in vain, thou livest a warning to thy country, which sympathizes with thee in thy suffering. Thou livest an affecting and alarming instance of the unbounded violence which lusts of power, assisted by a standing army, can lead a traitor to commit. For us he bled and now languishes. The wounds by which he is tortured to a lingering death were aimed at our country. Surely the meek-eyed charity can never behold such sufferings with indifference, nor can her lenient hand forbear to pour oil and wine into these wounds and to assuage, at least, what it can never heal. Patriotism is ever united with humanity and compassion. This noble affection which impels us to sacrifice everything dear, even life itself, to our country involves in it a common sympathy and tenderness for every citizen, and must ever have a particular feeling for one who suffers in a public cause. Thoroughly persuaded of this, I need not add a word to engage your compassion and bounty toward a fellow citizen, who, with long protracted anguish, falls a victim to the relentless rage of our common enemies. Ye dark, designing knaves, ye murderers, parricides, how dare you tread upon the earth which has drank in the blood of slaughtered innocents, shed by your wicked hands? How dare you breathe that air which wafted to the ear of heaven the groans of those who fell a sacrifice to your accursed ambition? But if the laboring earth doth not expand her jaws, if the air you breathe is not commissioned to be the minister of death, yet hear it and tremble. The eye of heaven penetrates the darkest chambers of the soul, traces the lead clue through all the labyrinths which your industrious folly has devised, and you, however you may have screened yourselves from human eyes, must be arraigned, must lift your hands, red with blood, of those whose death you have procured at the tremendous bar of God. But I gladly quit the gloomy theme of death, and leave you to improve the thought of that important day when our naked souls must stand before that being from whom nothing can be hid. I would not dwell too long upon the horrid effects which have already followed from our quartering regular troops in this town. Let our misfortunes teach posterity to guard against such evils for the future. Standing armies are sometimes, I would by no means say generally, much less universally, composed of persons who have rendered themselves unfit to live in civil society, who have no other motives of conduct than those which a desire of the present gratification of their passions suggests, who have no property in any country, men who have given up their own liberties and envy those who enjoy liberty, who are equally indifferent to the glory of a George or a Louis, who, for the addition of 1 penny a day to their wages, would desert from the Christian cross and fight under the crescent of the Turkish Sultan. He calling the redcoats mercenaries. From such men as these, what is not a state to fear? With such as these, usurping Caesar passed the Rubicon. With such as these, he humbled mighty Rome, and forced the mistress of the world to own a master and a traitor. These are the men whom sceptered robbers now employ to frustrate the designs of God, and render vain the bounties which his gracious hand pours indiscriminately upon his creatures. By these, the miserable slaves of Turkey, Persia, and many other extensive countries are rendered truly wretched. Holy shit. This guy's talking straight up. Slavery is wrong, dude. I think. Maybe? Mm. Though their air is salubrious and their soil luxuriously fertile, by these France and Spain, though blessed by nature with all that administers to the convenience of life, have been reduced to that contemptible state in which they now appear, and by these Britain. But if I was possessed of the gift of prophecy, I dare not, except by divine command, unfold the leaves on which the destiny of that once powerful kingdom is inscribed. But since standing armies are so hurtful to a state, perhaps my countrymen may demand some substitute, some other means of rendering us secure against the incursions of a foreign enemy. But can you be one moment at a loss? Will not a well-disciplined militia afford you ample security against foreign foes? We want not courage. It is discipline alone in which we are exceeded by the most formidable troops that ever trod the earth. Surely our hearts flutter no more at the sound of war than did those of the immortal band of Persia, the Macedonian phalanx, the invincible Roman legions, the Turkish janissaries, the gens d'armes of France, or the well-known grenadiers of Britain. A well-disciplined militia is a safe and honorable guard to a community like this, whose inhabitants are by nature brave, and are laudably tenacious of that freedom in which they were born. From a well-regulated militia, we have nothing to fear. Their interests is the same as that of the state. That's a line that's worth considering. Not by me, but militia lovers everywhere. When a country is invaded, the militia are ready to appear in its defense. National Guard. That's the militia. They march into the field with that fortitude which a consciousness of the justice of their cause inspires. They do not jeopard their lives, for a master considers them only as the instruments of his ambition. Uncle Sam does not want robots. And whom they regard only as the daily dispenser of the scanty pittance of bread and water. Survival. No, they fight for their houses, their lands, for their wives, their children, for all who claim the tenderest names and are held dearest in their hearts. They fight pro eris et foci for their liberty and for themselves and for their God. And let it not offend if I say that no militia ever appeared in more flourishing condition than that of this province now doth. And pardon me if I say, of this town in particular, I mean not to boast. I would not excite envy, but manly emulation. We have all one common cause. Let it, therefore, be our only contest. Who shall most contribute to the security of the liberties of America? And may the same kind providence which has watched over this country from her infant state still enable us to defeat our enemies. I cannot here forbear noticing the signal manner in which the designs of those who wish not well to us have been discovered. The dark deeds of a treacherous cabal have been brought to public view. You now know the serpents who, well cherished in your bosoms, were darting their envenomed stings into the vitals of the Constitution. But the representatives of the people have fixed a mark on these ungrateful monsters, which, though it may not make them so secure as Cain of old, yet renders them at least as infamous. Indeed, it would be affrontive to the tutelar deity of this country. even to despair of saving it from all the snares which human policy can lay. True it is that the British ministry have annexed the slavery to the office of the governor of his province, not to be paid out of revenue raised in America without our consent. They have attempted to render our courts of justice the instruments of extending the authority of acts of the British Parliament over this colony, by making the judges dependent on the British administration for their support. But this people will never be enslaved with their eyes open. The moment they knew that the governor was not such a governor as the charter of the province points out, he lost his power of hurting them. They were alarmed, they suspected him, have guarded against him, and he has found that a wise and brave people, when they know their danger, are fruitful in expedients to escape it. The courts of judicature also so far lost their dignity by being supposed to be under an undue influence that our representatives thought it absolutely necessary to resolve that they were bound to declare that they would not receive any other salary besides that which the general court should grant them, and if they did not make this declaration, that it would be the duty of the House to impeach them. Great expectations were also formed from the artful scheme of allowing the East India Company to export tea to America upon their own account. This certainly, had it succeeded, would have effected the purpose of the contrivers, and gratified the most sanguine wishes of our adversaries. We soon should have found our trade in the hands of foreigners, and taxes imposed on everything we consumed. Nor would it have been strange if, in a few years, a company in London should have purchased an exclusive right of trading to America. But their plot was soon discovered. The people soon were aware of the poison which, with so much craft and subtlety, had been concealed. Loss and disgrace ensued, and perhaps this long concerted masterpiece of policy may issue in the total disuse of tea in this country, which will eventually be the saving of lives and the estates of thousands. Yet, while we rejoice that the adversary has not hitherto prevailed against us, let us by no means put off the harness. Alright, so let's talk about taxes here. What are they talking about when they say they would soon have taxed everything that we bought? He's not talking about he's not talking about taxing the thing. He's talking about a foreign entity making a profit off of taxing the stuff that we are buying. So we are paying money for the privilege to buy goods through their service. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about this middleman that is charging us to sell somebody else's goods to us. That's what he's talking about with these taxes. And he is taking taxes from us in order to make our goods more expensive. He's profiting off of both of us and India. Not the East India Trading Company. East India Trading Company is part of British. He's talking that these people were profiting off of us and India by stealing money from the both of us. Even though we told them not to fucking do that. This isn't saying there should be no taxes. No, what it's saying is we're not paying you taxes for you to sell us somebody else's wares. It's very important that people understand what that means. If our taxes, the taxes that we are paying, are going to some other foreign entity, there better be a reason for it. If there isn't a reason for it, then those taxes should be going to our country's coffers for use for the American people. Restless malice and disappointed ambition will still suggest new measures to our inveterate enemies. Therefore, let us also be ready to take the field whenever danger calls. Let us be united and strengthen the hands of each other by promoting a general union among us. Much has been done by the committees of correspondence for this and the other towns of this province toward uniting the inhabitants. Let them still go on and prosper. Much has been done by the committees of correspondence for the House of Assembly. In this and our sister colonies, for uniting the inhabitants of the whole continent, for the security of their common interest, may success ever attend their generous endeavors. But permit me here to suggest a general Congress of Deputies, from the several houses of assembly on the continent, as the most effectual method of establishing such a union as the present posture of our affairs requires. As such a Congress, a firm foundation may be laid for the security of our rights and liberties. A system may be formed for our common safety, by strict adherence to which we shall be able to frustrate any attempt to overthrow our Constitution, restore peace and harmony to America, and secure honor and wealth to Great Britain, even against the inclinations of her ministers, whose duty it is to study her welfare. And we shall also free ourselves from those unmannerly pillagers who impudently tell us that they are licensed by an act of the British Parliament to thrust their dirty hands into the pockets of every American. But I trust the happy time will come when, with the besom of destruction, those noxious vermin will be swept forever from the streets of Boston. What's a besom? Besom. A broom made of twigs tied around a stick. A witch's broom. You know, the ones they use for flight. Sorry. Surely you never will tamely suffer this country to be a den of thieves. Remember, my friends from whom you sprang. Let not a meanness of spirit, unknown to those whom you boast of as your fathers, excite a thought to the dishonor of your mothers. I conjure you, by all that is dear, by all that is honorable, by all that is sacred, not only that ye pray, but that ye act, that, if necessary, ye fight, and even die for the prosperity of our Jerusalem. What the hell? Am I still in the same thing? Break in sunder with noble disdain the bonds with which the Philistines have bound you. Or did he go into a Bible verse? I need help with this one. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed by the soft arts of luxury and effeminacy. Into the pit digged for your destruction, despite the glare of wealth. Okay. Effeminacy. He's talking about what we would now consider toxic femininity. It is submission. Submission to luxury. And he's also condemning it in the previous page, even for women. So a lot of the things that we hold dear, like our gender roles, our founding fathers were like, that's bullshit. Don't do that shit. That's fucking weird, don't you think? How the fuck did our cultural identity change so much? Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed by the soft arts of luxury and effeminacy into the pit digged for your destruction. Despise the glare of wealth, that people who pay greater respect to a wealthy villain than to an honest, upright man in poverty almost deserve to be enslaved. They plainly show that wealth, however it may be acquired, is, in their esteem, to be preferred to virtue. But I thank God that America abounds in men who are superior to all temptation, whom nothing can divert from a steady pursuit of the interest of their country, who are at once its ornament and its safeguard. And sure I should not incur your displeasure if I paid a respect, so justly due to the much honored characters in this place. But when I name an Adams, such as numerous hosts of fellow patriots rush upon my mind, that I fear it would take up too much of your time, should I attempt to call over the illustrious roll. Adams is a roll? But your grateful hearts will point you to the men and their revered names. In all succeeding times shall grace the annals of America. From them, let us, my friends, take example. From them, let us catch the divine enthusiasm and feel, each for himself, the godlike pleasure of diffusing happiness on all around us, of delivering the oppressed from the iron grasp of tyranny, of changing the hoarse complaints and bitter moans of wretched slaves into those cheerful songs with which freedom and contentment must inspire. There is a heartfelt satisfaction in reflecting on our exertions for the public weal, which all the sufferings an enraged tyrant can inflict will never take away, which the ingratitude and reproaches of those whom we have saved from ruin cannot rob us of. The virtuous assertor of the rights of mankind merits a reward, which even a want of success in his endeavors to save his country, the heaviest misfortune which can befall a genuine patriot, cannot entirely prevent him from receiving. I have the most animating confidence that the present noble struggle for liberty will terminate gloriously for America, and let us play the man for our God, and for the cities of our God, while we are using the means in our power. Let us humbly commit our righteous cause to the great Lord of the universe, who loveth righteousness and hateth iniquity, and having secured the approbation of our hearts, by a faithful and unwearied discharge of our duty to our country, let us joyfully leave our concerns in the hands of him who raiseth up and pulleth down the empty empires and kingdoms of the world as he pleases, and with cheerful submission to his sovereign will devoutly say, although the fig tree shall not blossom, neither shall fruit be in the vines, the labor of the olive shall fail, and the field shall yield no meat. The flock shall be cut off from the fold, and there shall be no herd in the stalls. Yet we will rejoice in the Lord. We will rejoice in the God of our salvation. I think we figured out most of the stuff that I didn't understand at the time. There are still some parts that I said I was going to go over, but I didn't. And I won't, because I think the rest of it kind of covered it. I don't really want to go into the history of the Boston Massacre either, but it sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, well, they say that history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. Well, at least a bunch of people didn't die this time. We have failed as a country over not just decades, but a centennia. How did it get this way? All right, let's go. Boston Massacre, let's go. I don't like the new Wikipedia layout. I don't know if it's because it's new or because it looks old. Like the old version. Alright, let's take a look at the History Channel here. The Boston Massacre was a deadly riot that occurred on March 5th, 1770 on the King Street in Boston. It began as a street brawl between American colonists and a lone British soldier, but quickly escalated to a chaotic, bloody slaughter. The conflict energized anti-British sentiment and paved the way for the American Revolution. Why did the Boston Massacre? Well, that formatting is bad. I'm just going to leave it there. Tensions ran high in Boston early 1770. More than 2,000 British soldiers occupied the city of 16,000 colonists and tried to enforce British tax laws, like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. American colonists rebelled against taxes they found repressive, rallying around the cry, "No taxation without representation." Skirmishes between colonists and soldiers. Inversely, that means taxation with representation. Skirmishes between colonists and soldiers and between patriotic colonists and colonists loyal to Britain loyalists were increasingly common. To protest taxes, patriots often vandalized stores selling British goods and intimidated store merchants and their customers. Damn, dude, Antifa strikes again! Who gave Antifa time machines? On February 22nd, a mob of patriots attacked a known loyalist store. Customs officer Ebenezer Richardson lived near the store and tried to break up the rock-pelting crowd by firing his gun through the window of his home. His gunfire struck and killed an 11-year-old boy named Christopher Cedar and further enraged the patriots. Several days later, a fight broke out between local workers and British soldiers. It ended without serious bloodshed, but helped set the stage for the bloody incident yet to come. On the frigid, snowy evening of March 5th, 1770, Private Hugh White was the only soldier guarding the king's money stored inside the custom house on King Street. It wasn't long before angered colonists joined him and insulted him and threatened violence. At some point, White fought back and struck a colonist with his bayonet. In retaliation, the colonist pelted him with snowballs. Ah! I wasn't expecting that. Snowballs. There were also ice and stones. Bells started ringing throughout the town, usually a warning of fire, sending a mass of male colonists into the streets. As the assault on White continued, he eventually fell and called for reinforcements. In response to White's plea, and the guy was named White, and he was covered in snow. Oh my god, this poor guy. Oh, can you think of a shittier position for this one guy to have been in? Holy shit. Oh my god, this is goofy. This is a goofy start for a really sad day in American history. Ugh. In response to White's plea and fearing mass riots and the loss of the king's money, Captain Thomas Preston arrived on the scene with several soldiers and took up a defensive position in front of the custom house. Worried that bloodshed was inevitable, some colonists reportedly pleaded with the soldiers to hold their fire as others dared them to shoot. It sounds like America. Half the crowd was like, don't do it. And the other half was like, you won't. You won't. Preston later reported a colonist told him the prosecutors planned to carry off White from his post and probably murder him. Yeah, that's that sounds like the outcome of a snowball fight, let me tell you. All right, hold on. Let's go back up to. It also sounds like, dare I say it, a modern police report. Worried that bloodshed was inevitable, Captain Thomas Preston later reported a colonist told him the protesters planned to carry off White from his post and probably murder him. The violence escalated and the colonists struck the soldiers with clubs and sticks. Reports differ of exactly what happened next, but after someone supposedly said the word fire, a soldier fired his gun, although it's unclear if this discharge was intentional. Once the first shot rang out, other soldiers opened fire, killing 5 colonists, including Crispus Attucks, a local dock worker of mixed racial heritage, and wounding 6. Among the other casualties of the Boston Massacre was Samuel Gray, a rope maker who was left with a hole the size of a fist in his head. Sailor James Caldwell was hit twice before dying, and Samuel Maverick and Patrick Carr were mortally wounded. Within hours, Preston and his soldiers were arrested and jailed, and the propaganda machine was in full force on both sides of the conflict. Preston wrote his version of the events from his jail cell for publication, while Sons of Liberty leaders such as John Hancock and Samuel Adams incited colonists to keep fighting the British. As tensions rose, British troops retreated from Boston to Fort William. Paul Revere encouraged anti-British attitudes by etching a now famous engraving depicting British soldiers callously murdering an American colonist. It showed the British as the instigators, though the colonists had started the fight. It also portrayed the soldiers as vicious men and the colonists as gentlemen. It was later determined that Revere had copied his engraving from one made by Boston artist Henry Pelham. There's literally an early meme, the Winnie the Pooh meme. It's got the red shirt on, and that's a British soldier. And then there is the fancy Winnie the Pooh with the monocle and the coat, and that's a colonist. God damn it. We have a legacy of shit posters in America. God damn it. John Adams defends the British. It took 7 months to arraign Preston and the other soldiers involved in the Boston Massacre and bring them to trial. Ironically, it was American colonist, lawyer, and future President of the United States, John Adams, who defended them. Adams was no fan of the British, but wanted Preston and his men to receive a fair trial. After all, the death penalty was at stake, and the colonists didn't want the British to have an excuse to even the score. Certain that impartial jurors were non-existent in Boston, Adams convinced the judge to seat a jury of non-Bostonians. During Preston's trial, Adams argued that confusion that night was rampant. Eyewitnesses presented contradictory evidence on whether Preston had ordered his men to fire on the colonists. But after witness Richard Palms testified that, after the gun went off, I heard the word fire. The captain and I stood in front, about half between the breech and muzzle of the guns. I don't know who gave the word to fire. Adams argued that reasonable doubt existed. Preston was not found guilty. The remaining soldiers claimed self-defense and were all found not guilty of murder. 2 of them, Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy, were found guilty of manslaughter and were branded on the thumbs as first offenders per English law. To Adams and the jury's credit, the British soldiers received a fair trial despite a vitriol felt towards them and their country. The Boston Massacre had a major impact on relations between Britain and the American colonists. It further incensed colonists already weary of British rule and unfair of taxation and roused them to fight for independence. Yet, perhaps Preston said it best when he wrote about the conflict and said none of them was a hero. The victims were troublemakers who got more than they deserved. The soldiers were professionals who shouldn't have panicked. The whole thing shouldn't have happened. Sound familiar? Over the next 5 years, the colonists continued their rebellion and staged the Boston Tea Party, formed the First Continental Congress, and defended their militia arsenal at Concord against the Redcoats, effectively launching the American Revolution. Today, the city of Boston has a Boston Massacre site marker at the intersection of Congress Street and State, a few yards from where the first shots were fired. You know what? I think I would kill to have like historical news reports, like a podcast of them that read them as if they were current events. I think that would be great. Boston Massacre. Stamp Act. Stamp Act of 1765 was the first internal tax levied directly on American colonists by the British Parliament. The acts, which imposed a tax on all paper documents in the colony, do you think that's why Trump wanted to hide all of his classified? Do you think he's old enough to think that maybe he thinks that that's still a thing? Or maybe like his father thought that that was still a thing and he never thought to learn otherwise. Just kind of learned it from him and was like, oh, yeah, the Stamp Act. I want to pay taxes on these documents. Let's see. The act, which imposed a tax on all paper documents in the colonies, came at a time when the British Empire was deep in debt from the 7 Years' War. Oof. And looking to its North American colonies as a revenue source. Arguing that only their own representative assemblies could tax them, the colonists insisted that. Alright, let's take a look at the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War, which took place between 1756 to 1763, was a global conflict that spanned 5 continents, though it was known in America as the French Indian War. After years of skirmishes between England, Spain, and France in North America, England officially declared war on France in 1756, setting off what Winston Churchill would later call the First World War. While French, British, and Spanish battled over the colonies in the New World, Frederick the Great of Prussia in Europe faced off against troops from Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. The 7 Years' War ended with two treaties. The Treaty of Hubertsburg greatly enhanced Prussia's power on the European continent. The Treaty of Paris between France and Spain. Why does it sound like we're back here again? Let's see. Setting off what Winston Churchill would later call the First World War. Prussia's what I think it is, right? Frederick II ruled Prussia from 1740 until his death. Austria. Most prominent German states of its time. Not Russia, but P. Russia. Let's see. Frederick sought to embody the Platonic ideal of a philosopher king. Blech. Mm-hmm. Townshend Act. The Townshend Act were a series of measures passed by the British Parliament in 1767 that taxed goods imported to the American colonies, but American colonists who had no representation in Parliament saw the acts as an abuse of power. The British sent troops to America to enforce the unpopular new laws, further heightening tensions between Great Britain and the American colonies in the run-up to the American Revolutionary War. British crown emerged victorious from the French and Indian War in 1763, but defending the North American colonies from French expansion had proved tremendously costly to England. Oh boy, that sounds like a solution that we came up with. 250 years later. We spent so much money in the Middle East, had to come up with the money somehow. Bruh, come on, man. Why the fuck do we pay you guys? The British government thought the colonists should help pay the cost of their protection. The British Parliament enacted a series of taxes on the colonies for the purpose of raising revenue. Early attempts, such as the Stamp Act of 1765, which taxed colonists for every piece of paper they used, were met with widespread protests in America. The Townshend Acts, named after Charles Townshend, British Chancellor of the Exchequer, imposed duties on British china, glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea important to the colonies. Benjamin Franklin had informed the British Parliament that the colonies intended to start manufacturing their own goods, rather than paying duties on imports. These particular items were chosen for taxation because Townshend thought they would be difficult things for the colonists to produce on their own. He estimated the duties would raise approximately £40,000, with most of the revenue coming from tea. And that's why we invented coffee. While the original intent of the import duties had been to raise revenue, Charles Townshend saw the policies as a way to remodel colonial governments. Townshend Acts would use the revenue raised by the duties to pay the salaries of colonial governors and judges, ensuring the loyalty of America's governmental officials to the British Crown. However, these policies prompted colonists to take action by boycotting British goods. Charles Townshend didn't live to see the measures enacted. He died suddenly in September 1767, before the detrimental effects of his censure rule could materialize. The Townshend duties went into effect on November 20th, 1767, close on the heels of the Declaratory Act of 1766, which stated that British Parliament had the same authority to tax the American colonies as they did in Great Britain. By December, two widely circulated documents had united colonists in favor of a boycott of British goods. These influential pamphlets included letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania, a series of essays written by Pennsylvania legislator John Dickinson, and the Massachusetts Circular Letter, a statement written by Samuel Adams and James Otis Jr. and passed by the Massachusetts House of Representatives. Two other colonial... Oh, right. Appoint an Adams. Is he just making a joke there, or was that a thing? Oh, what? No. Back. Maybe he's just making a joke. Way below, way below, way below. Alright, let's see what happened next in our exciting tale of this book. Addresses of the First Continental Congress to the inhabitants of several Anglo-American colonies. We, the delegates appointed by the good people of these colonies to meet at Philadelphia in September last, for the purposes mentioned by our respective constituents, have, in pursuance of the trust reposed in us, assembled and taken into our most serious considerations the important matters recommended to the Congress. Our resolutions thereupon will be herewith communicated to you. But as the situation of public affairs grows daily more and more alarming, and as it may be more satisfactory to you to be informed by us in a collective body, than in any other manner of those sentiments that have been approved. Upon a full and free discussion by the representatives of so great a part of America, we esteem ourselves obliged to add this address to these resolutions. In every case of opposition by a people to their rulers, or of one state to another, duty to Almighty God, the Creator of all, requires that a true and impartial judgment be formed the measures leading to such opposition, and of the causes by which it has been provoked, or can in any degree be justified, that neither affection on one hand nor resentment on the other, being permitted to give a wrong bias to reason, it may be enabled to take a dispassionate view of all circumstances, and to settle the public conduct on the solid foundations of wisdom and justice. From counsels thus tempered arise the surest hopes of the divine favor, the firmest encouragement of the parties engaged, and the strongest recommendations of their cause to the rest of mankind. With minds deeply impressed by a sense of these truths, we have diligently, deliberately, and calmly inquired into and considered these exertions, both of the legislative and executive power of Great Britain, which have excited so much uneasiness in America, and have with equal fidelity and attention considered the conduct of the colonies. Upon the whole, we find ourselves reduced to the disagreeable alternative of being silent and betraying the innocent, or of speaking out and censuring those we wish to revere. In making our choice of these distressing difficulties, we prefer the course dictated by honesty and a regard for the welfare of our country. Soon after the conclusion of the late war, there commenced a memorable change in the treatment of these colonies. By a statute made in the 4th year of the present reign, a time of profound peace, alleging the expedience of new provisions and regulations for extending the commerce between Great Britain and His Majesty's dominions in America, and the necessity of raising a revenue in the said dominions, for defraying the expenses of defending, protecting, and securing the same, the Commons of Great Britain undertook to give and grant to His Majesty many rates and duties to be paid in these colonies. To enforce the observance of this act, it prescribes a great number of severe penalties and forfeitures, and in 2 sections makes a remarkable distinction between the subjects in Great Britain and those in America. By the one, the penalties and forfeitures incurred there are to be recovered in any of the King's Court's record at the Westminster, or in the Court of Exchequer in Scotland. And by the other, the penalties and forfeiture incurred here are to be recovered in any court of record, or in any court of admiralty or vice-admiralty, at the election of the informer or prosecutor. The inhabitants of these colonies, confiding in the justice of Great Britain, were scarcely allowed sufficient time to receive and consider this act, before another, well known by the name of the Stamp Act, and passed in the 5th year of this reign, engrossed their whole attention. By this statute, the British Parliament exercised in the most explicit manner a power of taxing us, and extending the jurisdiction of courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty in the colonies to matters arising within the body of a county, directed the numerous penalties and forfeitures hereby inflicted to be recovered in the said courts. In the same year, a tax was imposed upon us by an act, establishing several new fees in the customs. In the next year, the Stamp Act was repealed, not because it was founded in an erroneous principle, but as the repealing act recites, because the continuance thereof would be attended with many inconveniences, and might be productive of consequences greatly detrimental to the commercial interest of Great Britain. In the same year, and by the subsequent act, it was declared that His Majesty in Parliament, of right, had power to bind the people of these colonies by statutes in all cases whatsoever. In the same year, another act was passed for imposing rates and duties payable in these colonies, and the Statute of Commons avoiding the terms of giving and granting humbly besought his majesty that it might be enacted. But from a declaration in the preamble, and the rates and duties were in lieu of several others granted by the statute first before mentioning for raising a revenue, and from some other expression it appears that these duties were intended for that purpose. In the next year, 1767, an act was made to enable his majesty to put the customs and other duties in America under the management of commissioners. And C. What is it? Ampersand C. Etc. Ampersand C is the same thing as ETC. But from a declaration in the preamble that the rates and duties were in lieu of what several others granted by the statutes first appear and mentioned for raising a revenue, and from some other expressions it appears that those duties were intended for that purpose. In the next year, 1767, an act was made to enable his majesty to put customs and other duties in America under the management of commissioners and etc. And the king thereupon erected the present expense board of commissioners for the express purpose of carrying into execution the several acts relating to the revenue and trade in America. After the repeal of the Stamp Act, having again resigned ourselves to our antient, unsuspicious affections. It wasn't ancient, it's ourselves to our antient, unsuspicious affections for the parent state, and anxious to avoid any controversy with her, in hopes of a favorable alteration in sentiments and measures toward us. We did not press our objections against the above-mentioned statutes made subsequent to that repeal. Administration attributing to trifling causes a conduct that really proceeded from generous motives were encouraged in the same year, 1767, to make a bolder experiment on the patience of America. By a statute commonly called the Glass, Paper, and Tea Act, made 15 months after the repeal of the Stamp Act, the Commons of Great Britain resumed their former language and again undertook to give and grant rates and duties to be paid to those colonies. What is wrong with conservatives, dude? They don't really grow. Alright, so the problem here is that they were doing these laws and the stakeholders weren't present. We, as the stakeholders, were like, why are you trying to charge us for this stuff and not letting us be in on these talks? And they're like, oh, that's because we just want you to pay us for defending you from the French. Yeah, fuck off. To the express purpose of raising a revenue to defray the charges of the administration of justice, the support of civil government, and defending the king's dominions on this continent. The penalties and forfeitures incurred under the statute are to be recovered in the same manner with those mentioning in the foregoing acts. To this statute, so naturally tending to disturb the tranquillity then universal throughout the colonies, Parliament in the same session added another no less extraordinary. Okay, I'm gonna pause right here actually. I was watching Bo, and Bo was talking about the importance of taking into account the cost of war before going to war. Now, the words I'm going to use are going to sound uh, bureaucratic because they are. Um, but I'm going to take a different view on them. The question is, how would we profit from this war? How would this war benefit us? Besides it being the right thing to do. It is obviously the right thing to do. However, this is going to cost us in the long run. So if we're going to go to war, how are we going to use it to our advantage? Whether or not we win or lose, how do we get something out of this for ourselves? In Britain's case, their solution was to tax us for our papers because they are dumb. And that did not work out for them. So, that caused another war, which incurred more taxes on both America and Britain. So, if we're going to continue to be world police, we need a way that's going to profit us besides straight damage to both sides. I've talked about, and it's not just me because I got this from other sources like Bo and I don't remember who else. I've been reading and watching a lot these days. It's hard to keep them all straight. But they talked about why aren't we a global defense force? If we're going to go out there and effectively do peacekeeping missions, keep the peace, having weapons is only the first part. We can train people to be soldiers and police officers and the like, but what are we going to do? We can't train everybody to be that way. So how else are we going to effectively utilize those people? And part of it would be to not only train soldiers, but to train doctors and kind of have them work as a Doctors Without Borders. But instead of Doctors Without Borders, they're assisting the defensive force and the people in the area that might need medical care. Hear me out before you start going, well, what about Americans? Just let me finish what I'm talking about here, okay? In the military, we have something what's known as the medical hobby shop. Okay. On the outside, it looks like the military has excellent health care. And in some cases, it really does. But in a lot of cases, the medical hobby shop are doctors that are trained from scratch to do just that. And then after they get all of that experience, they go to a real hospital and get paid for it. A lot. Okay, so the military gets a lot, much worse healthcare than you would expect. Alright, so that's the first part of that. The second part is, if we train more doctors, then we'll have more doctors. Right? And not only will we have more doctors, we will have more doctors that didn't have any other means to pay for becoming a doctor. I think that's a win-win, right? We have doctors. We train doctors. They can practice on the people overseas. And then, then we have experience here for that. Plus, they can assist Doctors Without Borders. They can assist in pandemic situations overseas. They can assist in pandemic situations back at home. Our National Guard routinely trains with our military, and then we can have doctors in the National Guard too to help with recovery efforts. or natural disasters and acts of God. We can beef up our civil engineers. Farming, helping people learn how to sustain themselves so that when we leave, they don't go, well, we don't have anything left for us here, so I guess we'll just go back to war again. If we teach the people that we leave behind to take care of themselves, then they will. If they don't know already, then we can teach them ways that we have learned ourselves that we think is better. And if they don't think it's better, then we can learn from them their ways and try to learn that, and then we'll take that information back home and use it at home. That's profit. It's not direct profit, but it's still profit. We don't have to teach and train people to do these expensive things because now they know how to do it. Education is an expense. So, if we are paying to fight as a war or to be peacekeepers, then at the same time, we can use that to pay for education that we will not have to pay and wait for people to learn later when they come back and realize that they don't have any other job prospects because all they know is how to be a guard. All they know how to do is kill people efficiently. That's not a very useful ability by itself, you know. But if they come back and they can be a doctor, or they can be a civil engineer, or whatever, then we can recoup a lot of costs that way and increase our GDP almost overnight. Not to mention that every technological innovation that has come from the military, like the Navy that invented the internet, basically, profit isn't just cash money. It can also be future cost reductions to get us back on our feet quicker. If we know that we're going to have to take a hit for something, then we better prepare for taking that hit in a way that will benefit us. But there are other ways that we can get benefit out of something than directly charging people for something, especially when we know for a fact that we are really bad at spending that money. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, where did I leave off at? Mm-hmm. By statute commonly called the Glass Paper and Tea Act, made 15 months after the repeal of Stamp Act, the Commons of Great Britain resumed their former language, and again undertook to give and grant rates and duties to be paid in these colonies. For the express purpose of raising a revenue to defray the charges of the administration of justice, the support of civil government, and defending the king's dominions on this continent, the penalties and forfeitures incurred under the statute are to be recovered in the same manner with those mentioned in the foregoing acts. To this statute, so naturally tending to disturb the tranquillity Then the Universal, throughout the colonies, Parliament, in the same session, added another, no less extraordinary. Ever since the making the present peace, a standing army has been kept in these colonies. From respect for the mother country, the innovation was not only tolerated, but the provincial legislators generally made provision for supplying the troops. The Assembly of the Province of New York, having passed an act of this kind, but differing in some articles from the directions of the Act of Parliament made in the 5th year of this reign. The House of Representatives in that colony was prohibited by a statute made in the session last mentioned from making any bill, order, resolution, or vote except for adjourning or choosing a speaker. Oh, not choosing. That is choosing, spelled with a U. The fuck? Until provision should be made by the said assembly for furnishing the troops within that province, not only with all such necessaries were required by the statute, which they were charged with disobeying, but also with those required by 2 other subsequent statutes, which were declared to be in force until the 24th day of March, 1769. These statutes of the year 1767 revived the apprehension and discontents that had entirely subsided on the repeal of the Stamp Act. And amidst the just fears and jealousies thereby occasioned, a statute was made in the next year, 1768, to establish courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty on a new model, expressly for the end of more effectually recovering of the penalties and forfeitures inflicted by acts of Parliament, framed for the purpose of raising a revenue in America, and etc. The immediate tendency of these statutes is to subvert the right of having a share in legislation, by rendering assemblies useless, the right of property by taking the money of the colonists without their consent, the right of trial by jury by substituting in their place trials in admiralty and vice-admiralty courts, where single judges preside, holding their commissions during pleasure and unduly to influence the courts of common law, by rendering the judges thereof totally dependent on the crown for their salaries. These statutes, not to mention many other exceedingly exceptionable, compared one with another, will be found not only to form a regular system in which every part has a great force, but also a pertinacious adherence to that system, for subjugating these colonies that are not, and from local circumstances cannot, be represented in the House of Commons, to the uncontrollable and unlimited power of Parliament, in violation of their undoubted rights and liberties, in contempt of their humble and repeated supplications. This conduct must appear equally astonishing and unjustifiable, when it is considered how unprovoked it has been by any behavior of these colonies from their first settlement. Their bitterest enemies never fixed on any of them any charge of disloyalty to their sovereign or disaffection to their mother country. In the wars she has carried on, they have exerted themselves whenever required in giving her assistance, and have rendered her services, which she has publicly acknowledged to be extremely important. Their fidelity, duty, and usefulness during the last war were frequently and affectionately confessed by his late Majesty and the present King. The reproaches of those who are most unfriendly of the freedom of America are principally leveled against the province of Massachusetts Bay, but with what little reason will appear by following declarations of a person, the truth of whose evidence in their favor will not be questioned. Governor Bernard thus addressed the 2 houses of assembly, in his speech on the 24th of April, 1762. The unanimity and dispatch with which you have complied with the requisitions of His Majesty require my particular acknowledgment, and it gives me additional pleasure to observe that you have therein acted under no other influence than a due sense of your duty, both as members of a general empire and as the body of a particular province. In another speech on the 27th of May in the same year, he says, "Whatever shall be the event of the war, it must be no small satisfaction to us, that this province hath contributed to in its full share to the support of it. Everything that hath been required of it hath been complied with, and the execution of the powers committed to me for raising the provincial troops hath been a full and complete hath been as full and complete as the grant of them. Never before were regiments so easily levied, so well composed, and so early in the field as they have been this year. The common people seem to be animated with the spirit of the general court, and to vie with them in their readiness to serve the king. Such was the conduct of the people of the Massachusetts Bay during the last war. As to their behavior before that point, it ought not to have been forgotten in Great Britain that not only on every occasion they had constantly and cheerfully complied with the frequent royal requisitions, but that chiefly by their vigorous efforts Nova Scotia was subdued in 1710, and Louisbourg in 1745. Foreign quarrels being ended, and the domestic disturbances that quickly succeeded on account of the Stamp Act being quieted by its repeal, the Assembly of Massachusetts Bay transmitted a humble address of thanks to the king and drivers, noblemen, and soon after passed a bill for granting compensation to the sufferers in the disorder occasioned by that act. These circumstances and the following extracts from Governor Bernard's letters in 1768 to the Earl of Shelburne, Secretary of State, clearly shew with what grateful tenderness they strove to bury in oblivion the unhappy occasion of the late discord, and with what respectful deference they endeavored to escape other subjects of future controversy. The House, says the governor, from the time of opening the session to this day, has shown a disposition to avoid all dispute with me, everything having passed with as much good humor as I could desire, except only their continuing to act in addressing the king, remonstrating to the Secretary of State, and employing a separate agent. It is the importance of this innovation, without any wilfulness of my own, which induces me to make this remonstrance at a time when I have a fair prospect of having, in all other business, nothing but good to say of the proceedings of the House. They have acted in all things, even in their remonstrance, with temper and moderation. They have avoided some subjects of dispute, and have laid a foundation for removing some causes of former altercation. I shall make such a prudent and proper use of this letter as, I hope, will perfectly restore the peace and tranquillity of this province, for which purpose considerable steps have been made by the House of Representatives. The vindication of the province of Massachusetts Bay contained in these letters will have greater force if it be considered that they were written several months after the fresh alarm given to the colonies by the statutes passed in the preceding year. In this place it seems proper to take notice of the insinuation in one of these statutes that the interference of Parliament was necessary to provide for defraying the charge of the administration of justice, the support of civil government, and defending the king's dominions in America. As to the two first articles of expense, every colony had made such provision as by their respective assemblies. The best judges on such occasions was thought expedient and suitable to their several circumstances. Respecting the last, it is well known to all men that the least acquainted with American affairs that the colonies were established, and have generally defended themselves without the least assistance from Great Britain, and that at the time of her taxing them by the statutes before mentioned, most of them were
laboring under the very heavy debts contracted in the last war. So far were they from sparing their money with their sovereign constitutionally asked their aids, when their sovereign constitutionally asked their aids, that during the course of the war, Parliament repeatedly made them compensations for the expense of those strenuous efforts, which, consulting their zeal rather than their strength, they had cheerfully incurred. Severe as the acts of Parliament before mentioned are, yet the conduct of administration had been equally injurious and irritating to this devoted country under pretense of governing them. So many new institutions, uniformly and dangerous, have been introduced, as could only be expected from incensed masters, for collecting the tribute, or rather the plunder of conquered provinces. By an order of the king, the authority of the commander in chief, and under him of the brigadiers general, in times of peace, is rendered supreme in all the civil governments in America. And thus an uncontrollable military power is vested in officers not known to the constitution of these colonies. A large body of troops and considerable armament of ship of war have been sent to assist in taking their money without their consent. I'm still thinking about Winnie the Pooh. I'm not laughing at this. Oh my god, how many more pages? Almost there. Which is good. I got an appointment in the morning. Expensive and oppressive effort offices have been multiplied in the act of corruption industriously practiced to divide and destroy. The judges of the Admiralty and Vice Admiralty courts are empowered to receive their salaries and fees from the efforts to be condemned by themselves. The commissioners of the customs are empowered to break open and enter houses without the authority of any civil magistrate founded on legal information. Judges of courts of common law have been made entirely dependent on the crown for their commissions and salaries. A court has been established at Rhode Island for the purpose of taking colonists to England to be tried. Humble and reasonable petitions from representatives of the people have been frequently treated with contempt, and assemblies have been repeatedly and arbitrarily dissolved. From some few instances, it will sufficiently appear on what pretenses of justice those dissolutions have been founded. The tranquillity of the colonies having been again disturbed, as has been mentioned by the statutes of the year 1767, the Earl of Hillsborough, Secretary of State, in a letter to Governor Bernard, dated April 22nd, 1768, censures the presumption of the House of Representatives for resolving upon a measure of so inflammatory in nature as that of writing to other colonies on the subjects of their intended representations against some late acts of Parliament, then declares that His Majesty considers this step as evidently tending to create unwarrantable combinations to excite and unjustifiable opposition to the constitutional authority of Parliament, and afterwards adds, "It is the King's pleasure that as soon as the General Court is again assembled at the time prescribed by the Charter, you should require of the House of Representatives, in His Majesty's name, to rescind the resolution which gave birth to the circular letter from the Speaker, and to declare their disapprobation of and dissent to that rash and hasty proceeding. If the new assembly should refuse to comply with His Majesty's reasonable expectation, it is the King's pleasure that you should immediately dissolve them." This letter being laid before the House, and the resolution not being rescinded according to order, the assembly was dissolved. A letter of similar nature was sent to other governors and procured resolutions approving the conduct of the representatives of Massachusetts Bay, to be rescinded also, and the House of Representatives and other colonies refusing to comply. Assemblies were dissolved. These mandates spoke a language to which the ears of English subjects had for several generations been strangers. The nature of the assemblies implies a power and right of deliberation, but these commands, prescribing the exercise of judgment on the propriety of requisitions made left to the assemblies only the election between dictated submission and threatened punishment. A punishment, too, founded on no other act, such as is deemed innocent even in slaves, of agreeing in petitions for redress of grievances, that equally, after all, the hostile and unjustifiable invasion of the town of Boston soon followed these events in the same year, though that town, the province in which it is situated, and all the colonies, from abhorrence of a contest with their parent state, permitted the execution even of those statutes against which they were so unanimously complaining, remonstrating, and supplicating. Administration determined to subdue a spirit of freedom, which English ministers should have rejoiced to cherish, entered into a monopolizing combination of the East India Company to send to this continent vast quantities of tea, an article on which a duty was laid by a statute, that in a particular manner attacked the liberties of America, and which therefore the inhabitants of these colonies had resolved not to import. The cargo sent to South Carolina was stored and not allowed to be sold. Those sent to Philadelphia and New York were not permitted to be landed. That sent to Boston was destroyed because Governor Hutchinson would not suffer it to be returned. On the intelligence of these transactions arriving in Great Britain, the public. So they voted not to let them come in with those wares specifically, and the people refused to buy the tea, and they still sent the boats with the tea anyway. Well, at least they're determined. To mention these outrageous proceedings is sufficient to explain them. Oh. Next paragraph. On the intelligence of these transactions arriving in Great Britain, the public spirited town last mentioned was singled out for destruction, and it was determined the province it belongs to should partake of its fate. In the last session of Parliament, therefore, were passed the acts of shutting up the port of Boston, indemnifying the murderers of the inhabitants of Massachusetts Bay, and changing their chartered constitution of government to enforce these acts. That province is again invaded by a fleet and army. Mention these outrageous proceedings is sufficient to explain them. For though it is pretended that the province of Massachusetts Bay has been particularly disrespectful to Great Britain, yet, in truth, the behavior of the people in other colonies has been an equal opposition to the power assumed by Parliament. No step, however, has been taken against any of the rest. This artful conduct conceals several designs. It is expected that the province of Massachusetts Bay will be irritated into some violent action that may displease the rest of the continent, or that may induce the people of Great Britain to approve the mediated vengeance of an imprudent and exasperated ministry. Okay, so that is really similar to the things that we were seeing with the protests. A bunch of different protests. You know, like they were showing I don't remember what cities they were, but they were showing Black Lives Matter protesters and Antifa and ACAB and etc. And you know, they're all doing this, but there were people in other cities and states that believed and felt the exact same way. And they weren't being listened to because, what, one group of people in one county got uppity? Well, that's dumb. If the unexampled pacific temper of that province shall disappoint this part of the plan, it is hoped that other colonies will not be so far intimidated as to desert their brethren, suffering in a common cause, and that thus, disunited, all may be subdued. All right, divide and conquer. Okay, cool. Against the colonies, against the people. To promote these designs, another measure has been pursued. In the session of Parliament last mentioned, an act was passed for changing the government of Quebec, by which act the Roman Catholic religion, instead of being tolerated, as stipulated by the Treaty of Peace, is established, and the people there are deprived of the right to an assembly, trials by jury, and the English laws. In civil cases are abolished, and instead thereof, the French laws are established, in direct violation of His Majesty's promise, by his royal proclamation, under the faith of which many English subjects settled to that province. And the limits of that province are extended so as to comprehend those vast regions that lie adjoining to the northerly and westerly boundaries of these colonies. The author's arbitrary arrangement flat themselves. Are we done yet? This is boring. The authors of this arbitrary arrangement flatter themselves that the inhabitants, deprived of liberty and artfully provoked against those of another religion, will be improper instruments for holy shit. Those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it, right? Jesus Christ, dude. Artfully provoke them against those of another religion, will be proper instruments for assisting in the oppression of such as differ from them in modes of government and faith. From the detail of facts herein be recited, as well as from authentic intelligence received, it is clear, beyond a doubt, that a resolution is formed and now carrying into execution the freedom of these colonies by subjecting them to a despotic government. At this unhappy period, we have been authorized and directed to meet and consult together for the welfare of our common country. We accepted the important trust with diffidence, but have endeavored to discharge it with integrity. Though the state of these colonies would certainly justify other measures than we have advised, yet weighty reasons determined us to prefer those which have adopted. In the first place, it appeared to us a conduct becoming the character these colonies have ever sustained, to perform, even in the midst of unnatural distresses and immature dangers which surrounded them, every act of loyalty, and therefore we were induced to offer once more to His Majesty the petitions of his faith and oppressed subjects in America. Secondly, regarding with the tender affection which we knew to be so universal among our countrymen, the people of the kingdom from which we derive our religion, we could not forbear to regulate our steps by an expectation of receiving full conviction that the colonists are equally dear to them. Between these provinces, and that their body subsists, the social bond which we ardently may wish to never be dissolved, and which cannot be dissolved until their minds shall become indisputably hostile, or their inattention shall permit those who are thus hostile to persist in procrastinating, in prosecuting with the powers of the realm the destructive measures already operating against the colonists, and in either case shall reduce the latter as such a situation, that they shall be compelled to renounce every regard but that of self-preservation, notwithstanding the vehemence of which affairs have been impelled. They have not yet reached that fatal point. We do not include to accelerate their motion. Already alarmingly rapidly, we have chosen a method of opposition that does not preclude a deeply deplore the urgent necessity that presses us to an immediate interruption of commerce that may prove injurious to them. We trust they will acquit us of any unkind intentions towards them by reflections that we subject ourselves. I'm falling asleep. Holy shit. Subject ourselves to similar inconveniences that we are driven by the hands of violence into unexperienced and unexpected public convulsions, and that we are contending for freedom, so often contending for by our ancestors. Almost there. Come on, we can do it. Okay. The people of England will soon have an opportunity of declaring their sentiments concerning our cause. In their pity, generosity, and good sense, we repose high confidence, and cannot, upon review of past events, be persuaded that they, the defenders of true religion and the asserters of the rights of mankind, will take part against their affectionate Protestant brethren in colonies, in favor of our open and their own secret enemies, whose intrigues for several years past have been wholly exercised in sapping the foundations of civil and religious liberty. Another reason that engaged us to prefer the commercial mode of opposition arose from an assurance that the mode will prove efficacious, if it be persisted in with fidelity and virtue. That your conduct will be influenced by these laudable principles cannot be questioned. Your own salvation and that of your posterity now depends upon yourselves. You have already shown that you have entertained a proper sense of blessings you are striving to remain. Against the temporary inconveniences you may suffer from stoppage of trade, you will weigh in the opposite balance the endless miseries you and your descendants must endure from established arbitrary power. You will not forget the honor of your country. That must, from your behavior, take its title in the estimation of the world. To glory or to shame, and to you will. With the deepest attention of the world, with the deepest attention, reflect that if the peaceable mode of opposition recommended by us be broken and rendered ineffectual, as your cruel and haughty ministerial enemies, from a contemptuous point of your finances, of your firmness, insolently predict will be the case. You must inevitably be reduced to choose either a more dangerous contest or a final, ruinous, and infamous submission. Motives thus cogent, arising from the emergency of your unhappy condition, must excite your utmost diligence and zeal, to give all possible strength and energy to the pacific measures calculated for your relief. But we think ourselves bound in duty to observe to you, that the schemes agitated by those colonies have been so conducted as to render it prudent that you should extend your views to mournful events, and to be in all respect prepared for every contingency. Above all things, we earnestly entreat you, with our devotion of spirit, penitence of heart, and amendment of life, to humble yourselves, and implore the favor of Almighty God. And we fervently beseech His divine goodness to take you into His gracious protection. Adopted October 21st, 1774. I am falling asleep. Like, I keep nodding. Like micro naps. I gotta wake up so that I can finish and leave. Alright, well. Where is my thing? There it is. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for learning with me. Might be on tomorrow and do things. I might not be. It depends. I might read more of this book on Saturday. Tuesday will, as always, be game dev stuff. Anyway, good night. Thank you so much. Bye bye.